Welcome to the Parenting Roundabout podcast for the week of July 10th, 2023. I'm Catherine Haleko, and I'm here with Nicole Eridix.
Hello.
And Terry Morrow.
Hello.
Every week we chat about what parents are talking, complaining, and obsessing about right now. But this week, things are changing. Nicole is leaving us. So this week she's going to share some of her favorite episodes from our years and years and years and years of podcasting together, because Nicole and Terry had a podcast together before we started this one. Yes. So it for them has been over a decade, I think we've determined,
yes.
right?
Yes, 11 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It
sure has been.
So Nicole has picked out her top four favorite episodes, and we are going to share them this week as our farewell to Nicole.
Yeah.
So tell us about the first one that you picked out.
Well, this one was pretty easy because it is the reason why we did this podcast. Yeah. It's because we're all moms. So, but I want to backtrack and say, it was really hard because we have over 2,000 episodes.
And you went over each one of them. You listened to it again to pick the four.
Well, and I thought, okay, well, which ones were the funniest? Well, I truly have enjoyed every podcast, and I think we've laughed, in almost like 99.9% of our podcasts. So they've all been, I've enjoyed them all, and they've all been funny, and they've all made me laugh on some level. And so that was really difficult. So then I went and I thought, okay, well, which ones really kind of signify a time or marked a special occasion or, was important, really important at the time. And so, of course, this one, how we became moms, and it's what started it all. So That's why I chose it. And I hope you enjoy listening.
Today, we are talking about how we became moms in the first place. Now, your guys' story is different than mine, so why doesn't one of you start, and I'll just insert mine in the middle for a little variety. Catherine, what was your birth story?
Well, I was thinking about this because both of my children just had birthdays.
Aw, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy labor anniversary to you.
That's right. Well, the labor anniversary was a few days before the birthday. With my and also, some years their birthdays coincide with Easter, and obviously some years they don't. And I do specifically remember with my firstborn that, first of all, I was gigantic. Like, she ended up weighing 9.5 pounds.
So, gee.
Wow. And you're not like your height wise is,
like 5'2". So
right.
This was significantly out of proportion.
Yeah.
And so Easter Sunday, I went to church and to brunch with family like I had always done, but I had very few options for clothing. An appropriate dress for church that would fit over a ginormous belly was very difficult. But I remember I did wedge myself into something. Also, I had a condition called PUPS. It stands for, I believe, well, never mind what it stands for because it's long and medical, but basically it's like extremely itchy hives. That you get. Like, they started.
Never heard of that.
Yeah.
If you're not uncomfortable enough, have some hives.
Exactly.
Wow.
If you're not already like having to wear one of those girdle things because your belly is so giant and you can't even haul it around. I had stretch marks, and these things started in the stretch marks, like just these big red itchy hives.
Oh, man.
And then they spread all over Not on my face, thank goodness, but pretty much everywhere else. And there's no cure. You can take oatmeal baths, and you can use hydrocortisone cream.
Oh my gosh.
And the only cure is to give birth, and then they generally go away.
Oh, wow.
So I can remember being at my cousin's apartment, and they had this very tiny powder room, just this teeny tiny little half bath. And I was in there like I barely fit and trying to coat myself with hydrocortisone cream, requiring like an entire tube to get it everywhere it needed to go.
Oh, man.
So this was Easter. And then the next day, Monday, I remember I had book club. So I was living in New Jersey, and I had gone into the city, and on the bus on the way home, I started having contractions.
Oh gosh.
So this is Monday. Okay. Now, when did I give birth? Wednesday.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry.
And also, after, those many, many hours of labor, I had a C-section. Like, there was...
Oh, man.
The baby was not coming out. So...
Wow. Did you have an epidural, though?
Oh, yeah.
To get through all that? Okay.
Oh, for sure. And I was spared even having to push because it just wasn't happening, that...
Yeah.
There was not enough progress in those 40-some hours for it to progress to a point where I would push. So I had a C-section, which was fine. It was not a big deal. Although I do remember afterwards, probably a few days or even weeks later, my husband, was in the room with the C-section, and, they put like a drape between your head and your belly, so you can't really see what's going on, and he couldn't really see what was going on either. But I said to him a few days later, like, well, you got to see a little more than I did, like what was it like? What was happening? He just said, I don't want to talk about it. Because, when you have a C-section, they have to, like, move organs out of the way.
Oh,
man.
In order to access
oh my gosh,
the baby who's being stubborn and not coming out. So there you go.
And this was just for the first one?
Yeah, this was for the first one. For the second one, I did decide I wanted to try to avoid having a repeat C-section. So, and I did go into labor on my own. I spent many, many hours walking around my neighborhood trying to go into labor. Also because at the time that I was due, there was a rumor, which turned out to be true, that Johnny Depp was living in a house on my street because he was filming a movie nearby.
No way.
So I was like walking up and down the street, like
Johnny?
maybe I'll catch a glimpse. But anyway, so I did go into labor on my own, and my second child was due the same day as my first child. I had the same due date.
Wow.
And basically, and that was, my first child was actually born on the due date. So I was due on her birthday with the second one. And I started having contractions like right after midnight. So basically her birthday happened. And then as soon as the calendar changed to the next day, he was like, okay, we can go.
I love it.
But once again, labored for quite a while. And then they decided, this will not be happening. So repeat C-section it was.
Wow.
You have nice doctors.
There you go. Many hours of labor for both kids, but no actual, no point for all of it. Like, especially for the second one, I could have just scheduled the C-section and been done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, man.
Oh, well.
See, it's stories like that, Catherine, that make me glad for the way that I became a mom.
Right.
It was traumatic at the time, but as I look back, not so bad, really. No hives, little gastrointestinal distress here and there, but nobody rearranging my organs on an operating table. No trauma for my husband. Only had to do it once.
Yeah.
So,
right. You really got the 2-for-1.
Yay, adoption. Woo!
So tell us about it.
It was a more prolonged process, I guess, because we had been, when we came to terms with the fact that me getting pregnant just wasn't going to happen unless we went to, fairly invasive extremes. And we just both felt like, if there are existing children who need parents, we don't really want to go be doing that. Mm-hmm. So, we thought, well, you make this decision to adopt, and then the hardest part is over. And now somebody's just going to drop a kid at your doorstep. But it turned out that there was like a 5 or 6 year waiting list for infants in our area. And then we go to Wendy's and you see those ads for the National Adoption Center. And I think that's what it is in Philadelphia. And so we said, well, we'll do that. We could, that would be a good thing to do. We could take a little older kid and so we went to like a conference for that and we filled out a bunch of stuff. We had a home study done. And then they kept sending us, we expressed interest in some kids and they said, no, they would lose funding if they changed states, or there was always a reason. Just nothing was happening. And then at some point, the place we'd gotten a home study done called us and said, we're starting a program in Russia, and there's a little girl there who's 4.5 years old and has some language delays. Do you want to go get her? And we said, we had planned to adopt in the U.S., and we would have liked to have done that, but this is a child who needs a parent, and we can get her right now, so let's do it. Aww. But, perhaps mindful of the sort of experience you had, Catherine, where you go through a great trauma and then you have to do it again, we said, got a little brother there for her? Can we just, make this a 2-for-1 deal? So then they, suggested the child who eventually became our son, and we went to Russia. My husband had never been off the continent. He had been to Canada, but not to Europe. I had been to Europe a couple of times, but not that part of Europe. So
how much notice did you, how much preparation time did you have?
I don't really remember what we had. I feel like it was enough. They may have changed the date a few times. We were, of course, very anxious to go do it. So we had to bring stuff. I mean, in addition to bringing large amounts of cash to give to the various agencies, we had to bring donations for the orphanage. And so at that point, I had been working for a women's magazine. I had quit because I was trying to get pregnant, and then we were trying to figure out how to do this adoption, and I was working such hours there, as we know I do, and it just wasn't working. So, but I had contacts there, so I was able to go there and say, hey, to the beauty editor, do you have a whole bunch of extra stuff you could just give me to take to Russia? Yeah. And we just got donations from various places and bought things, and so we had, suitcases full of donations. We had cash strapped to us in those belts you put under your clothes. Mm-hmm. And it was just very weird. It wasn't unlike any travel. And we were met in Moscow by 2 adoption coordinators who were very sharp, spoke very good English. We felt like we were in really good hands. There was some stuff we had to do in Moscow, and then we took a train to Petrozavodsk, which is where the orphanage was. And there we were delivered unto their coordinator there, it was a very new program. And we were in a hotel for a while where we had a translator once a day. People would just come pick us up, drive us to the orphanage. So there was no speaking of English pretty much the entire time. And they would just bring us to the orphanage. We would play with the kids. They would take us to dinner, and then we would be back at the hotel. And after a while, there was some administrative problems, so it just wore on and on and on. We were supposed to be there for 2 weeks, and we were there for a month. And, the kids were confused as to why we weren't taking them away, and we were confused because nobody was really telling us anything. And so I guess that was our labor. And we just, at one point, we started living in the apartment of this woman who was the coordinator, and she wasn't real happy we were there. I think they hoped we would leave, and then they could just shut this program down, but we were there, and we were staying. And so finally, all of a sudden, they put us in a car and we're in a place and signing paperwork. And I said, is this it? Is this the adoption? Did it go through? Because everything's in Russian. And then they drove us back to the place. We got the kids and got on a train. So it was a lot of waiting. I guess not unlike childbirth. It was a lot of waiting followed by rapid action.
Right, a flurry of activity.
Exactly.
So then did you have to hop on how soon after did you get on the plane and fly home?
Well, we had to take this overnight train to Moscow, which,
with the 2 kids.
I don't think my kids had ever been, they'd rarely been outside of that place, at least that they could remember. I think they were in a car for the first time when we had to take them for passport pictures while they were still at the orphanage. So here they're leaving everything they've ever known. Mm-hmm. They're getting on a train which they've never been in. My son was free from playpen confinement and not so interested in sitting still. It's like, oh, okay, here we are in this extremely interesting place with all sorts of stuff to touch and look at, but it's time to sleep now. Let's put you on a bug. It's time to sleep. So we had to surround him with people to make sure he couldn't get out. And it was a wild night. And then we were in Moscow, I think, for a couple of days, staying with the mother of one of their coordinators and getting, all the paperwork to go back to the States. And then we got on a plane. Of course, these kids have never been on a plane. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this little boy is never going to sit still for the extremely lengthy plane flight. We're going to be chasing him all. It's going to be impossible. So he gets on the plane, he immediately falls asleep and sleeps for the whole time. On the other hand, my daughter, who had been pretty obedient, when it got time to put her coloring things away and put up the tray table for landing, she was not interested in doing that. And, let everybody on the plane know loudly and with, screaming in tears. And it's like, honey, I'm sympathetic. I know you have nice things for the first time in your life and you want to play with them, but this is not a negotiable thing. I'm saying in English and she's not.
Right.
Doesn't understand English. And everybody on the plane is looking daggers at us. And we just adopted her, new kid. So, and then we landed and our friends were there. And it was just, oh my gosh, such a relief. And,
wow.
To be back in the United States and to be back home and to have gotten through this thing. And went home and we had a bunch of family members there. And it was really nice. And stuff went on from there. And I did not have stitches to have to recover from or, the trauma of having a human come out of my body. We could just hit the ground running. So all in all, though there were times when, that are the equivalent of some of the traumas you all have suffered, it was much easier. And I guess different ways of being hard. Mm-hmm. But I greatly value that experience. That was, and the nice thing about it also was my husband was going through the ordeal just as much as I was.
Yeah.
He wasn't left out of that process.
Yeah. So we were in it together much more than, even the most helpful and solicitous husband is still not having a human coming out of his body. So,
yeah.
Wow.
So how was it for you, Nicole?
Yeah, well, I guess I was the only, you each had a different scenario and so did I. I had both of my kids naturally without any pain medication. So I had the full experience, which I would never recommend in a million years. And it was definitely not something I wanted.
Seemed like a good idea at the time, did it?
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't even something I planned for.
But then you did it twice.
Well, because first of all, in British Columbia, it's socialized medicine. You don't get epidurals on demand. You get it.
Wow.
Yeah, you get it when it's available, and or if you're having a C-section. But they only have a few anesthesiologists available so backtrack. So my son, I was extremely sick with him. I had the hyperemesis gravitum, or I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
So I was extremely sick with him. I was in bed for the first 6 months. And and at the time I was in a very, very small community. It was like 2,000 people, if that. And so the doctors there were rural doctors, great doctors, but they were. Every time I'd go to the emergency room, they would send me home, telling me to like wear C-band things, pressure points, or drink Maalox or whatever. It was so tough because I had nothing. And I didn't know any better. I was young. I mean, I wasn't young, but I was fairly youngish, and so I didn't really know what other options existed. And then I was 14 weeks overdue, or 14 days overdue. So he was 2 weeks late, and my labor was, so I ended up having him in this small community, in this small hospital. And we were the only patients in the hospital at the time. That's how small it was. It was like literally the doctor, 2 nurses, and then my parents and my husband's parents were waiting outside. And then my brother showed up halfway through, and they were waiting outside. And then the secretary who was there that night. So, but it was, it was like 27 hours from start to finish. And,
gosh.
And then it was all because it was such a small hospital and it was rural, we didn't have any, I didn't have access to any kind of pain medication or, and so then he was, vacuum delivered. So I don't know if you know much about that, but it's not forceps, but it's the same idea because he was not wanting to join the world. So as soon as he was born, he was put in an ambulance and rushed to the nearest city, and I had to stay behind for a couple of hours until they could get another ambulance to me. And I would just never recommend having a baby in a small town ever again. So it took me 5 years to think about wanting another one because that was so intense. And then the second time around, I actually, because I was living in the city by that time in Vancouver. And so I had thought, okay, I'm going to do it right this time. So I hired a doula, which I absolutely highly recommend. She was fantastic. And then I had told my doctor, I want an epidural. This is how I want things to go down, blah, 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 write up the birth plan. I was also very, very sick with my daughter, very sick, but they'd give me some medication to use. So that helped. I was able to get to work. And then, I had my daughter, but the whole, anesthesiologist thing didn't work out again as hoped for. And so she was delivered naturally. We had actually laughing gas at the time to use. And so they hooked me up with some laughing gas, and but my husband decided he wanted to try it as well. So actually we spent a lot. So for the last half of my labor, when we were at the hospital, my husband and I were sharing this laughing gas and laughing and so it was kind of, it was difficult, but my husband and I, we're laughing the whole time and joking and then I gave birth to her naturally. So, and she wasn't as long. She was only about 15 hours or so. So that's my story.
Still feeling pretty good about mine.
Still feeling good about your overnight flights.
Listeners, if any of this is giving you pause, recommend adoption.
Yes.
Well, that was very exciting, and I'm surprised we've never done that before.
Yeah.
That's it for today's farewell memory from Nicole. Tune in tomorrow for our regularly scheduled round 2 for Terry and I to talk about TV shows. And then on Wednesday for another memory from Nicole. We are always interested in what you have to say, so drop us a comment on our website, our Facebook page, or Twitter, where you'll find us at Roundabout Chat.